All right, so what we saw in the previous video was just we looked at a couple different ways of how we can inspect HTTP requests, and kind of got a hint of what the beginning of a response looks like and how to begin fulfilling the different parts of the contract that make up the protocol. What we're going to do now is actually go and make, we're going to go gather up the samples of and types of requests that can be made and what those look like. So then we can begin writing code around that. Um, as you see here, and you can see here, there's some pretty key elements that get pulled around. One of the things that we should talk about is the various types of requests that can be made. And if you, well, hold on, let's just go ahead and look at this. So the types of requests or the HTTP methods, you can find that here. If you want to, you can go to http.dev and bump around on this website. The most common methods that are used for HTTP are GET. So if you type in somewebsite.com/webpage and you press enter, that's a GET request. That's your browser sending out a message to a server saying this, like, give me something. Like, I want to get this, give it back to me. Um, Another common one is head. So head is maybe I don't want to actually load the whole entire web page. I just want to see what would be coming back. And then if I'm a go at that, then I will send a GET request or whatever to pull down the rest of the page. Yeah, so you can read about that here. Options is used very frequently to check whether or not, if I want to talk to a certain web page or an endpoint, which is sort of a way of using HTTP to talk to a remote service, sort of an area to hit. It's sort of like if you're a ship in the ocean, an endpoint is a dock that you can pull into and then exchange goods. Um, if you're a certain kind of ship, you're going to pull into a certain kind of dock, and that's where this analogy is going to break down. Uh, but you want to know what are the options available for the different types of uh, methods that you can send, the different types of requests that you can send to a given endpoint. Options, lets you see what's available for it. Um, don't re Okay, so a lot of these we don't really use them a lot. I mean, they exist and they are used in some applications, but uh, a lot of the time we're not really deleting things. If you're making this a specific type of application, you might delve into some of these other methods. But more often than not, we're going to touch upon post. Um, yeah, so we're gonna be getting things. We're gonna be posting data back. We may be implementing some of these other parts, but at least for the initial scope of this project, we're gonna be working on get, and we're gonna be working on post. With those basic operations, you could probably do about 90% of all of the work that is required to interact with a remote machine using HTTP. Um, so in terms of that, let's go ahead and start looking at the get method. Number one is, yes, right here. Here's what we're looking for. We are looking for these example requests. One of the things that we're going to be doing as we are writing our code is we want to design it in such a way that we can try to apply some type safety to what's going on. So that means we can get certain safety guarantees from the compiler by forcing some types into existence, as well as we want it to be testable. We want to be able to make sure that our functions are working without necessarily having to spin up a whole entire server and make actual HTTP requests and whatnot. We will get to that point. But as you're beginning to build something, you want to try to start from the smallest little core that you need and then expand it. if you try to say do 10 things at once, that will increase the likelihood that you fail, that you don't actually succeed at what you're doing. Not that that's always a bad thing, especially if it's a personal learning project. But if you're actually trying to build something and deliver it for other people, you need to be able to focus on what you need, the critical pieces. So get to your working critical core, your MVP, your minimum viable product. And then you can expand upon it and expand upon it. And one of the ways that you can reliably expand upon it is if you have written your application in such a way that you can continually test and make sure that as you are adding new things, that you're not breaking the old things. You'll still always break something, but you can reduce the amount of things that you break by writing your test and making sure, writing your test, writing your function, and making sure that things continue to work as you go. So yeah, let's just go ahead and gather this up. So we get our example of a GET request here. Let's go ahead and open up a code editor. You can't see it on the recording here, but let's go ahead and open up a new window. And this, yeah, see, I've been doing a bit of work here. Let's go ahead and open up a new file for the time being, just a text file. And we're going to get an example of our GET request. Let's see what other potential. We're not going to worry about too much of that. They're asking about partial gets and whatnot, potential responses. We're going to ignore that for the moment. That's important, but we're still going to kind of ignore it. And next, what we're going to go do is get our example post body. So let's go post. And when you post data, you can send data in multiple different formats. As an example, you may be sending it as the contents of a form on a web page. And typically the way that that gets encoded, if you're not intervening and doing something special, is that it comes with, as a part of your request header, this value, it's called this key, that says, all right, the content that I am sending to you as a part of the body down here of this request is going to be this type, so that you know what to do with it. And this is also an important moment to talk about more, like what is a minimum viable HTTP request? So let's maybe come back over here and let's break it down. Let's make this big. So what we first have is we have our method. And let's go all caps for the fun of it. So we have the method. We've talked about get, we've talked about options, we've talked about post. Anyway, this is the very first thing that's expected as a part of an HTTP request. The next part of it is the URI. This is the thing that we are wanting to interact with. So this is everything that comes after the first /. So when you say, google.com / whatever, that is what shows up here as a part of the URI. And finally is the protocol version. So here we have HTTP 1.1. This is kind of an important random detail. It may come into play if you actually go to write an HTTP server, because at the time that HTTP was created, there were no other versions. There was just HTTP. There weren't 1.1, version 2, now version 3, various other intermediary steps. So there may be random requests that come in that just have method. That's very sweet. That's not what I wanted to do. URI. And yeah. And if we see this, then we know in general that this is actually version 0.9. So in version 0.9, which is what was very first, well, very first publicly released in the early 90s, uh, we didn't have a protocol version. Um, so if later on, as we are parsing requests and we see that something comes in and we don't see that protocol version tail on it, we know that we're talking to an older implementation of some client or some client that is not properly following the protocol, or they're following the version 0.9 uh, protocol. And we just sort of have to know that and accommodate it a little bit. Okay, so anyway, we're gonna delete that. So this is the very first line. This is a bare minimum thing that is expected when we are making a request. But then there are other parts of the request that come in. And so there are various keys that come in. So I could say, some key name, and key value. Okay. Oh, this is trying to be HTML, that's why. Let's just say txt and be done. Plain text. That's what you want. Okay. And you may have any number of these, depending on what the method is and what sort of response you're returning. You may have any number of these. You might have you might have authentication. You might have response size. Number of bytes, cookies, anything. Those are all sitting here. And then finally, this is separated, and down here is where you would have any of your body stuff. So the basic structure of an HTTP request and response is this. We have, well, at least for the request. You may have noticed if you were watching the previous video that I made a mistake when I was responding on the command line. So the request, we have method, URI, protocol version, any keys, a blank line, and then the structure of the body. And then when we're making a response, we invert that a little bit. Since a client needs to know how we are communicating back with them, the first thing that we need to send is the protocol version. So that's a little bit backward. Protocol version. Next we have the status code. And this is a number. So you've probably run into websites where something is missing or something goes wrong. You'll get 401, 404. When things go right, you don't see on the web page. You don't normally see 200. If it's 200, you'll see the contents of whatever you were requesting. But anyway, there are these status codes, and then some text description of the code. Te code. All right. All right. And so with this, and then again, we have optional header keys. And then blank line, and if needed, a body. And this is the general structure of an HTTP request and response. So what we are focusing on, at least for the next few videos, is parsing this request. And as we go along, we will build up the pieces that we need in order to respond to this appropriately. And I think this is getting on, and so we're gonna go ahead and end it, and then we'll actually start creating our project and writing some code next time. Thanks.